Hey, Pratik, welcome to Founder Journeys. Great to have you here. Uh, so,
Yeah, thank you,
and
Sanjeev. It's great to be here. Looking forward to the discussions.
I'm sure this is a topic that is of a lot of interest to many people out because of how fast things are developing in the tech world. And security has always been the cornerstone of what really makes tech last for long, and of course, get users to adopt, adopt and try out new stuff. Especially in today's world, where every other day is cutting edge, meaning we are pretty much living on the cutting edge, right? So, yeah. So let's talk about what you're building on Founder Journeys. We'd like the founders themselves to talk about it. So it's best that you give your short intro into what you're doing.
The name of the company is Appaxon, and what we are building is proactive product security. So let me break it down. First of all, when you look at the life cycle of a software product or an application, you need to make sure that security is put in all the stages of the product lifecycle. So that is something that we are doing. Essentially, AppSec used to be just focused on dev and pipeline. So we are looking at the entire lifecycle of a product and bringing in security there. And the second aspect of it is making it more proactive. So think about uh, using security design principles rather than reactive, which is more a fire drill. Proactive product security is what we're building here at Appaxon.
And how did you come across the idea? Meaning, let's rewind a little bit and go back into the origin story and how you landed up on this particular problem.
Yeah. So maybe what will help is if I give you a little bit about my background. So my background has been in the product space all throughout my life. Prior to Appaxon, I was a founder of an API security company called Mesh7, which got acquired by VMware. And I was running products at VMware, managing the life cycle of APIs. Prior to that, I was running products for Juniper's cloud software business unit, which was all of cloud security, cloud networking, cloud enterprise. Engineer by training. So, and then in my past life, I was a developer at NetScaler, building some of the protection and security products. So, if you look at my career journey, it's been all about building products. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is that when you look at the products that you are building, security is always an afterthought. It always comes in later in the stages. So what we said is, uh, it makes a lot of sense to bring in security early on. And obviously there are some challenges of doing so. The first challenge is that, uh, and I've been guilty of it as well. When I was running products, if you bring in the security team too early in the development or design lifecycle, it we feel, at least as product leaders, we feel that things get slowed down, and that's a challenge. And I would say it's a real challenge, and it's not just me. A lot of product leaders feel that way, and that has got some reasons, and I'll come into that in just a little bit. So I'm just being more succinct here. The so as a result, what ends up happening, and there are also, bringing in security early on has got challenges of, lots of people egos that need to be matched, because sometimes product leaders say that, hey, why is security team defining the requirements for me, which is required. The net result of it is that security comes in as an afterthought, and because of that very reason, the cost of bringing in security into the product goes up. I mean, it is a well-known fact that if you bring in security early on, the cost goes down and there is a much higher economic benefit. But because of these various reasons, security is pushed out towards the end. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that we bring in security early on in the life cycle, not just late stages, early on in the life cycle, and make sure that security is sprinkled throughout the life cycle of the product. So that is number one thing that we do, as I said, product security. The second thing that we realized is most of the investments today that happen in security are more on the reactive side. So if you look at, there is a lot of detection and response solution, there is observability solutions, there is triaging solutions. These are more after the fact. But one of the other things that has happened over the years is agents have taken the world by a storm, right? Agents and LLMs have taken the world by a
Yeah.
storm. So product building is happening using agents, vibe coding, and then product deployment is happening using agents. So the speed, scale, and complexity of applications is going up exponentially. At the same time, if you look at the hackers, they are not sitting idle. They are using agents to hack as well. So in this kind of an environment, reactive security becomes too slow. I mean, you can speed up reactive security using agents, but you have to move towards more proactive aspects of it. So things like, how do you red team your application? How do you do threat modeling, things like that. So those are some of the reasons why we sought to build out a product in the proactive product security space.
I'm just curious, when we think about today's world where everybody is vibe coding, and you said that it's getting more at scale, faster, and more complex. I was thinking the other way around, that because of vibe coding, people are thinking business logic or maybe workflows. And it's not about the complexity, but it's more about much more of boilerplate stuff being used and leveraged by agents. And then people just don't know what to take care of. And hence, there are a lot of vulnerabilities in what they build out, right?
Maybe let me explain the complexity part a little bit. When I said complex, what I meant is, if you look at the previous world, applications used to be much simpler. You have a 3-tier application, or you have microservices based applications and
Right,
things like
right.
that, right? But if you look at today's applications, they are very complex. So you've got API driven everything. You've got obviously, agents that come into the picture. You've got lots of third party integrations. You've got OSS tools, OSS coming in, lots of supply chain components. I was talking to a CISO, and he mentioned a statistic where every enterprise uses, tens of integrations.
Yeah. A
Actually
lot of connectors.
smaller companies use tens of integrations. Larger companies, enterprises use, the number might be in the thousands, right? So there is also LLMs which are being now used. So what has happened is applications have converted themselves into complex products. And
Hmm.
that complexity is something where you need a security solution which is commensurate with that complexity, which looks at all that complexity. That's
Understood.
the whole aspect of complexity. However, as you rightly said, vibe coding and all these things are making initial, call it prototype version of the product, simple. And also there is simplicity that is brought in other aspects. But I would say the products are becoming complex, which means that security needs to keep pace with that complexity.
So, what's the key advantage of going with your product? Meaning, what's your differentiator really?
Yeah. So mm, let me just say one thing, that when you look at a product lifecycle, you have got what I call as the different loops. Actually, not me. The industry calls as different loops. So you have got the design loop, which is where you are building the high level, low level designs. You are putting in all the requirements, etc. And then that pushes into the development loop, which is called the inner loop. And this is a pretty common term that you probably know is being used, which is where you do the development lifecycle, you write code, you build, you test, and so on. And then you push it out to the outer loop, which is basically where you integrate, you test, you deploy, and you operate. And sometimes people say, oh, there is an operations loop as well, but I'm just combining that into a outer loop. So you've got design loop, inner loop, and outer loop, also called design, development, and deployment loops. As I mentioned, security today is very much focused on mainly the outer loop, where you've got all the reactive tools. There are application security testing, DAS tools, SCA tools, which are also in the deploy kind of a stage. What we are doing is we are bringing in security into the entire life cycle, which means starting with the design phase, where you create threat models, you take those threat models and you create security requirements out of it. And then once you create security requirements, you make sure that the security requirements are actually implemented, which means the inner loop, all those security requirements are taken care of. And then in the outer loop, you test those, which means that you look at solutions like red teaming, which is more proactive in nature, and make sure that all the threat models and security requirements that have been identified are actually being implemented. So that is the covering the entire life cycle of an application, which I also call as a security loop, bringing the security loop into the entire life cycle of an application. And one of the other important things about this is to make sure that the context flows through within the application. So for example, when you have created the threat model, one of the challenges that a lot of first of all, threat models are not created as much, and we can talk about that more because it's thought of as very academic and heavy. But even if the threat models are created, they live in an island. So how do you make that threat model go through the life cycle? And then when you are red teaming it, you basically look at those threat models and do the red teaming as opposed to just doing out of the blue. The differentiation, coming to the differentiation of the product, it focuses on the entire life cycle of an application. Uh, which is basically the product security part of it, and looking at it more from a proactive aspect, and which is where, do threat models, make sure that the security requirements are created, they're implemented, and then do the red teaming of the product.
Okay, I have multiple questions in my head right now, but let's kind of simplify a few things, right? For the people who consume this episode, what exactly does red teaming mean?
Sure. So, I mean, red teaming is, I believe, a term that has been um, gotten from the military, I believe.
Okay.
Basically, what it does is when you look at an application, you want to make sure that if an application is you've built in you've fixed all the security vulnerabilities in that application, you have built in all the security controls around that application, whether it is a firewall, whether it is a API gateway, or WAF, or what have you. You've put in all the security controls in place. Red teaming comes in and tries to uh, break down that application from outside or from inside, and reports that, hey, these are the things that are broken. So that is basically what red teaming and pen testing kind of go hand in hand. But pen testing is more about breaking it from the outside. Red teaming is objective driven. Hey, this is one objective. I want to break this from this particular perspective and see what I can do. So that is where the red teaming part comes in. So in a very straight, like, call it, layman's language, red teaming would be testing the application and making sure whatever security has been implemented is good. The
Okay.
application is actually secure.
So
So you can
essentially, you're
think of
trying to break it.
that is the way to look at it. Yes, that's right.
Okay. So red teams are basically you are going to come and brute force your way and try and see if this can be broken,
Correct.
and then
Correct.
if you give us a clearance, that means it's all good.
That is right. That is right.
Okay. Okay.
So one of the things that we also do is help. So there is this blue team, right, within an organization, which is, so red team tries to break it, blue team tries to secure it, and then you've got the purple team, which is does both. So I think one of the ways to look at our solution is also, helps the blue teams. So in a way, it is, call it purple teaming, not necessarily purple teaming, but to some extent purple teaming, where you are trying to break it from the outside, work in collaboration with the blue team, and make sure that all the security controls and everything is taken care of and put in place.
So the other thing is, as when we started this conversation, you were mentioning how people are very apprehensive about starting with security early on because they think it's going to slow down the whole development process. And you mentioned now that uh, when you go in with your product, you're talking about starting at the design phase, which is super early, any which ways. So how do you solve that problem? Meaning, how do you get that perception that okay, we need to talk about security at this phase itself? And how do you kind of convince people to say, let's try this?
Yeah. Now, actually, that's a very, very good question. And in fact, I wrote a blog recently about
Okay.
this very problem. I'm happy to share that. So I think it's not that people don't realize that you need to bring in security early. what ends up happening is, let me break down what exactly happens. I've been guilty of it because I've been running
Okay.
products, and I bring in security pretty
I'm
late
sure
in
we
the
all
game.
have
And
been guilty of it at some point in time. Yeah.
so let me explain what exactly happens there. So the first thing is, it's a well-known fact that if you bring in security early, which means at the design phase, you eliminate a lot of architectural rework. You make sure that security is built in into this as opposed to bolted on later on, right? So there is a lot of economic benefit. So if you look at, if you think of it as a curve, the economic benefit keeps going down as the product goes from design to development to deployment stages, right? Whereas v- most of the security is backloaded today because security does not come in the design phases.
It's an
They're coming
afterthought,
in
as
the,
you said. Yeah.
it's an afterthought. So the curve for security is in the opposite direction. So these two
Okay.
curves are conflicting with each other, right? Now, why is that the case? What happens is, and I talk about this in my blog, there are probably three reasons why this happens. Number one is that when you bring in security early on, you are expecting the security team to have full context of the product, because at the design stages you are talking about, hey, these are the market requirements, this is what the features should be, etc. So you are expecting the security teams to be product experts, almost like product managers, which is hard because they obviously are spread thin across multiple lines of businesses, and it's hard for them to know each and every product in detail. So that is one problem, which I call as the context gap between the security teams and the product teams. The second thing is, even if, let's say, you somehow solve that problem, security team comes in early, you have got some sort of these people ego issues that, hey, why is security coming in and telling me, hey, build, put in these requirements? I
Yeah.
should be the one driving the features and all that. So there is this collaboration gap that happens. And then the third thing is, product teams mainly focus on the functional requirements of the product, and security is more a non-functional requirement. So they don't talk the same language often.
At all.
Yeah, they don't talk the same language at all. One is talking about guardrails and policies
Yeah.
and controls, and the other is talking about features. And I need to put in this for this particular market, etc. So there is this communication gap, and this is where I talk about the context gap, the collaboration gap, and the communication gap. And the way to solve this problem is through agents. Because if you, let's say, imagine a scenario where a product team has an agent, a security team has an agent, and then the agent, when I say agent, I'm talking about obviously, software
Yeah.
agents.
Yeah.
They talk to each other. They don't have any egos. They can figure stuff out by themselves. And that clears the I mean, they can talk the same language because obviously they are software products. They don't have the communication gap, they don't have the collaboration gap, and they have full context because you will feed the agents good amount of context of the product. So all these gaps are actually eliminated. So what we do is we take the help of software agents and of course AI and all the LLM power that we have at our disposal. We use that to solve this problem and bring in security early on, uh, so that in the design phase, you can do threat modeling, you can do security requirements, you can do security reviews. All of that can be done very early in the life cycle. And so this whole concept of bringing security later on doesn't happen. The curve gets inverted. The security curve gets inverted, and so now you have got security brought in early on, and obviously there is economic benefit of that.
Wouldn't this mean that your ideal customers would need to have a well-defined product roadmap or a PRD kind of?
Well, what I would say is that, um, yes, they would need to know what they are building, and when they are in the design phase, they typically have a PRD, for example, in place, some sort of marketing requirements. And I guess the biggest challenge that I have seen, even as myself leading products, is that I know everything about the functional requirements of the product. I know what I want to build most of the time. Actually, all the time, I should know what I want to build. But when it comes to the security requirements, it is very much half baked because although I know I'm in the security space, I've been building security products, but still when it comes to actual threats that the product can have, it it is very sparse. The security requirements, the non-functional requirements are very sparse. So to answer your question, yes, there needs to be some PRD, but which is something which the product team already knows. And what we are doing is using these agents to augment that knowledge, that PRD or whatever you have, with the non-functional security and compliance requirements. And that is where you bring in security early on, where the functional requirements have already been defined.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking because okay, I work extensively with startups, which is why my mindset is of that we are a lot of things are ship fast, and then see whether it lands right, and then you're looking at audience feedback, customer feedback, seeing whether it gets any traction, and then you start building on a certain roadmap, or you may completely kind of pivot around along the journey. So in that process, again, I'm speaking now from the
Yeah, yeah,
developer's perspective or
yeah,
the founder's perspective, where we are trying to get things done fast in that perspective, when I'm looking at a security related requirement, it's more about, okay, as long as I'm building user authentication, let's say, I need to make sure it doesn't fail. That's it. That's in my head, that's what's happening, right? Or if I'm doing an integration, or if I have, API keys that I've added into my repo somewhere, it should not be exposed anywhere. I'm talking very basic stuff here, but
yeah.
that's how the average person is thinking here. But when you flip to enterprise, it's a different ballgame altogether, because there they will not move until they have an end-to-end product roadmap defined, because it could be a mature product already. So um, two scenarios, rather two ecosystems pretty much. So
Yeah.
which is the one that is most interesting to you at this time?
So I would say, maybe the way I look at it is that even if you are a startup who is building a product, this whole mentality today of I can just do a bare bones security now and then bring in security later is what I feel needs to change. Because, and the reason for that is simple, right? Because people see security as a blocker. I just want to figure out my functional requirements now, and then I'll create my non-functional requirements, which is security requirements and other things later on, right? But I think that needs to be flipped, and it can be. The reason people don't do that is it's not easy. It's not easy, seamless, and usable. But I do feel that, for example, when we are building our current product, we have to take care of a lot of the security aspects early on in the life cycle. So let me give you a simple example. You are building an e-commerce application. One of the threats that can happen to your application is somebody could do a parameter tampering on one of your APIs. So you have built what it means is that, let's say in your checkout API, somebody can alter the price of your product from $4.99 to $1. And your threat models have not been put in place, so you have not taken care of that. What will end up happening is your e-commerce application is going to break. And it's going to be really bad for you, right? You're selling something which you should have sold for $500. Now you're selling
Right.
it
You're
for
going to lose a
$1.
lot of money overnight,
You,
basically.
you are going
Yeah.
to lose a lot of money overnight, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is where, and this is a very classic example of, if you look at the threat model framework, there is something called STRIDE framework, which stands for spoofing. It's an acronym for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, and elevation of privileges. STRIDE. This falls squarely in the T bucket, which is tampering. You are tampering a parameter of an API which has not been thought through. And this is, by the way, I mean, in my previous company, I used to build API security. This was a common problem. Parameter tampering is a common problem. And that happens because threats have not been thought through in the design phases. They have not been implemented. And so when you are putting something in production on the pretext of, hey, faster time to market, that becomes a real problem. So which is why my advice or my way of thinking is bring in security early on. And it doesn't have to be very heavy. That is where the agents make threat models. For example, and maybe I'll give you an example of threat model. Threat modeling typically, you know, if you might need to get consultants, it might take days to build threat models. So that is very heavy for a startup. When you look at an agentic way of doing threat models, it is a matter of hours, maybe an hour or so. You can just build a threat model by just doing a little bit of chat. So this is almost a very low cost way of bringing something very high value early on in the life cycle. And that is where I would say, to answer your question, maybe a long-winded answer to your question,
No, no, this is a good one.
I
I
would,
mean, this is needed because see, a lot of people don't understand the why.
yeah, yeah.
The reason why I'm asking you these questions is because when we talk to people, everybody's trying to build stuff because it's become so easy to build stuff. I'm nobody knows how secure are those platforms. They may claim to be secure. They may be big brands. They're funded, all that stuff. But then because it is such a difficult problem to solve, and how do you plug it into a product and offer security at scale to people who are on your platform? Again, I'm thinking about this because I've seen how platforms work. The
Mhm.
average folk on the street may not be thinking about it at all. They may be thinking about their product problem and what they're trying to, uh, solve for and kind of get going with. So it's very important that people understand the why.
Right, right. And I think that makes sense because, see, you are absolutely right. It is thought of as very heavy, and that is why people don't want to deal with security early on. But our goal is to make it lightweight and usable and fast, so that it's almost like you're writing code and then you just plug in the threat models and security requirements that spits out all the requirements that you need to build and build it. And I've also seen this, that developers, uh, I've interacted with a lot. I've been a developer in my past life. Developers want the requirements to be in place for them to build. They don't want to think about, hey, what are all the things I need to take care of? So if there is a solution that gives them, hey, these are all the requirements you need to take care of. So for example, the tampering case I was talking about, check the parameter that has come in an API. Do not assume that the parameter that has come from the client side or the API call is the final number. Check it against your database or what have you. So if you provide these very detailed requirements to a developer, they are going to build it because for them it's not a big problem. The challenge comes in when the whole process of creating those requirements and creating those threat models becomes a matter of get a consultant and spend
Yeah, yeah. It's
so
long
much
drawn out.
money,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of a thing. So yeah, I think that makes complete sense. Make it easy and usable, and people are going to build in security early on, and that's our goal.
Okay. So if I am, let's say I'm using one of these vibe coding tools and creating a product, my because I'm a paid subscriber and I'm paying X amount of dollars to that product, let's say I'm using uh, a cursor or I'm using a lovable or whatever it is, right? The moment I do that and I'm started building, my expectation from that platform is that it's secure. You know, I'm just kind of putting myself in the shoes of an average person who's just building stuff because it's available to build, right? So in this case, I'm not your customer. The platform becomes your customer because they have to offer services on their platform to so that it's. I mean, they have to secure, make their platform capable so that by default, anything that's built on the platform is secure. It's like how if you kind of go and modify, create a database on Superbase and you create a row and then you leave it exposed, it'll give you an alert then and there in the product saying that, hey, this is a vulnerability, right? It gives you a risk assessment of your database as well. So something like that. So
Yeah,
do you
well,
see your product getting that kind of a meaning? Are you integrating into these kind of big product platforms?
yeah. So I think there was a maybe there was a bunch of questions in there. So let me let
Yeah.
me let me let me
Sorry about
answer
that.
that in a. No, I think it makes sense. It makes sense. It's a very relevant question, and we have obviously thought about it as well. So let me explain it in a little bit more detail. First of all, when you are building using Cursor or Replit or any of the Lovable or any of the vibe coding tools, and by the way, my co-founder, he's been doing a lot of vibe coding as well. So first of all, I would say that the security of your product is very hard for the tool to figure out. So for example, there will be portions of the code that you will be developing, but there is an aspect of business logic which can be tampered with. That level of business logic kind of issues, don't think a cursor or applet will, at least not today. Maybe in future, you just give a prompt, everything spits out, everything is taken care of. But I would say it's still years away. So that is number one. So you do need to take care of your own application security today, right? That is number one. The second thing is that in order for us to make the life of a developer easier, we are looking at how do you, for example, create a security requirement right from the cursor
Interface.
interface or a lovable interface. So while you are writing the code, so think of it as the functional requirements of the product and the non-functional requirements of the product can potentially be generated right when you are writing the code. So we are thinking about integrations with all these different vibe coding tools or IDEs so that
Okay.
it becomes very straightforward for the user. But yeah, to answer your question, today those things are not there, and one of the reasons is that a lot of the code that is being generated by these vibe coding tools have been trained on open source code. And open source code, I mean, is open source code, right? There's so many vulnerabilities and things in that I I don't know how much of, and there is
I'm
good amount
fairly
of vulnerabilities.
familiar,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think I would lean towards open source a lot
Hmm.
because I like the whole aspect of it being secure because there are so many more people contributing to the vulnerable. Meaning, if there is a vulnerability that is found, there'll be many collaborators who try and fix it faster than in a proprietary code base. Is what I
Yeah,
see.
I would say
Right?
yes. I would say for the projects that have lots of active contributors, you're absolutely right. For projects which don't have too many contributors, and obviously, Cursor is not gonna only use the open source
Yeah.
code for their
Yeah.
pre-training, which is highly contributed. They'll use all kinds of open source code that is
Yeah.
available at their disposal. So yeah, so there
Yeah.
is there is a high chance that a lot of vulnerabilities are in there while you are building
And
the
you
code.
hit upon a very classic problem with regard to all these tools out there, right? Because we don't know what kind of data they've been trained on. We don't know how much of refactoring is happening from the team that runs those platforms in terms of cleaning up of code, right? And like the whole typical problem of if you're going to train on crappy data, you're going to get a lot of crappy outputs,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
A lot of people don't realize that it's being generated a lot of stuff, and and it's not always fact, right? People who are using chat gpt, for example, they're asking questions on day-to-day things, and I don't know how many people are actually checking if it is fact or just new stuff.
correct, correct, correct,
It's a
correct.
big problem.
Yeah, it is.
you
It is
know
a big problem. In fact, I mean, if you have to ask ChatGPT that, can you provide me
the
sources of this
sources,
particular
yeah.
number that you
Yeah.
got, and then suddenly the response comes back saying that, oh, I apologize, I
Yeah,
just made it up.
I just mocked it up.
Yeah,
Yeah, it happens a
yeah,
lot.
yeah,
Yeah, same thing with code, right?
yep, yeah,
It does
yeah,
that quite a bit. Coming back to the security aspect of it, right? Now, where do you see autonomous security going? You mentioned autonomous, you have it on your website as well. What do you really mean by that?
yeah. So I would say that just like self-driving cars has different levels of autonomy, I would say security also has multiple levels of autonomy. The end goal of, hey, I am just hands off, the system is taking care of itself, there it's finding out issues and then fixing those issues, that I don't know if that'll ever happen because people don't want to rely on software to do a complete end to end. But I do think that at this point there is a level of autonomy with with the tools and AI tools that are out there where you can rely on some of the agents to give you, obviously human assisted, you have to have human in the loop, but you given enough context, you can speed up the process of generating, call it security requirements, call it threat models or red team red teaming of the applications and things like that. You can actually do that with some, maybe, level 3 of the self-driving autonomy. So you can do that. So I think that's where the if you are using tools which, like what we are building at Apaxon, if you are using tools like that to assist humans to speed up their productivity, it's a force multiplier today. I think that's how we are looking at it. But yeah, I mean, eventually, at some point, I think this autonomy will be more than what it is today, because as and when you get some sort of inputs and the human goes and maybe corrects. An example being, in a red teaming scenario, let's say the the agent is trying to brute force its way into an application, and you see that it's trying to do password spraying. You just then go and assist it, saying that, hey, stop password spraying. So it might take and maybe look at the S3 bucket. So it might do something else, maybe look at the S3 bucket and maybe find the issue. That information that the human has passed to the agent learns it. And then next time it sees a similar kind of problem, it can go and look at the S3 bucket instead of doing password spraying. So those inputs from human improves the agents, obviously. And there will be more problems that it will be able to solve going forward. But yeah, and that's how we are looking at autonomy at this point.
Yeah, I think human in the loop definitely, because otherwise, again, to the previous point, right? You don't know when it starts going into its own, starts manifesting new things that don't really make sense, or kind of breaks everything. That's a risk. So human in the loop obviously is the only way, at least in the enterprise scenario. I don't see the human getting out of the loop
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
anytime in the near future, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
So this is very interesting. A little bit of a segue, because the whole challenge with regard to adoption of security is very similar to adoption of UX practices. Because even in user experience, when we are working with clients and stuff, the whole process of creating user stories, user journeys, and really, mapping out various possibilities is time consuming. Of course, now you can again have agentic stuff there which does it faster, but that is why there is so much of resistance to adopting the thinking process of why do we need it, how is the user going to use a certain thing, what are the workflows, mapping it out doesn't come as a priority. Functionality, and then we'll see, you know.
I think that's a very, very interesting analogy that you're bringing in, because to your point, UX makes or breaks a product a lot of times. If I see a crappy product, I'm not going to use it. Right? If the user experience is bad, after a while, I would be like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to switch over to something else.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't realize this in the name of faster time to market. Hey, I need to build this product out, put it out in the market. And I think security is very similar in that respect, because if your product keeps breaking and you are losing revenue, faster time to market doesn't even make any sense. So how do you ensure that UX as well as things like security are built into the product,
Mainstream,
as opposed to,
yeah.
yeah, and mainstream? 100%
Correct.
agree with that.
I kind of made some notes on the side where, I written from what I was thinking of, that devs will see security as barriers. Because when I used to sell product to enterprises, we used to always have long drawn out discussions with the security and compliance team. So it has been seen as a compliance thing. You have to meet their security needs so that your product gets accepted for a pilot, you know. So this is an interesting thing for you to pitch to startups, that make sure that your products are already ready to plug into any enterprise,
Yeah, I think
right?
that's 100% the goal, because as we were just talking about earlier, when startups look at product and they want to ship faster and without any blockers, security blockers early on, how do you make sure that you put in security in such a seamless and lightweight manner that they don't think of it as a burden anymore? Yeah, that's absolutely the goal. Because I mean, we have probably at some point developed something. I've also spent a lot of time developing stuff. I think that is a big problem that people face all the time. How do you do security? I know that I need security early on, but how do I do it in a very lightweight fashion? That has been always a challenge.
And most of those, let's say the SOC to compliance, most of the acceptance criteria are based on preset things. It is not based on what's current now.
Mhm.
Correct? Meaning I'm talking in terms of risk. I'm talking because there's so much of stuff happening at such a rapid pace. Risks are changing every other day. As you said, the hackers are not sitting quietly. So then how do you make sure? So is there anything that, and the reason why I'm asking you this is because you mentioned proactive
Mhm. Mhm.
as one of the key traits of their product, right? So is there a way for companies today to come up with some reference that is much more real time for in terms of classifying capabilities or security levels?
Yeah, I think maybe what you were referring to as preset is more the compliance aspect of it. Hey, I've got SOC 2, I've got a set of things that I need to meet. I've got whatever ISO 27001 or PCI DSS and so on. So you're right. You're absolutely right. And that is where security is obviously different from compliance. I remember a nice and vivid picture where two guys riding on a bike. One guy is just wearing a helmet and shoes, and
Mm,
that's it. He's probably
yeah,
in his undergarments, and the other guy is wearing a jacket,
but no
proper
helmet.
shoes, but no helmet as well,
Helmet also?
and
Okay.
and a leather jacket and everything. So the right side was talked about as compliance because you need to wear shoes and you need to wear helmet. Those are the only two requirements, right?
Yeah,
But the left side is actual security, where if
security.
you fall, you are not going
Yeah,
to hurt yourself, right? So that
right.
picture kind of stayed in my mind, but that is exactly where you are also referring to. There are
Yeah.
some rules that you need to follow, and that is basically what compliance is. But security is all about making sure that you don't have lost revenues if you have built in security well enough. Nobody is hacking into an environment because I mean there is a report from IBM which quantifies each breach causes an enterprise almost $4.4 million, each and every
Yeah.
breach,
Not
right?
surprising.
So
Yeah, yeah.
it's a lot of money because you lose your customers, you lose your and this is an IBM report that comes out every year. IBM cost of breach report. They analyze what are all the things that happen. You lose your reputation, a lot of things that you lose. So if you want to not get breached, if you want to make sure that I'm not just taking care of compliance, but I'm taking care of security, that is where you need to look at things like threat modeling, very comprehensive threat modeling. Threat modeling is nothing but what could go wrong with my application. And when I do the threat modeling, I can say that, okay, these are the things that can go wrong with my application. So how do I fix it? These are all the security requirements that I built in. And then when you're putting it in your environment, you just test it out. Hey, have I put in all the security requirements that I built in my environment? So I think that whole life cycle of looking at what can go wrong, building against that, and then testing against that, that needs to be a principle throughout, not just checking some of the boxes of compliance.
The more you talk about the whole concept of threat modeling, the more I see a deeper coupling between the UX journey and security journey. Because user stories, we talk about the journey, that meaning every user story is like the user is saying, I want to do this with the dashboard. Let's say I want to see a widget that shows me insights about sales. And then so that's an artifact that is to be on a dashboard. And then we have conditions as to when do they want to see that and what kind of data they want to see that. So then when you kind of contextualize that with security, what are the APIs we are fetching from, or what other services are we calling? Things like that come into play, which is where again you have to think about security,
Right,
right?
right,
So
100%.
it can
Yes,
get very closely tied in with this from a design perspective.
yes, no, absolutely. And I think in my past life, I always included design team early on in the life cycle, but I mean security not so much, which I should have. But that's one of the learnings that we are trying to make it easier.
So the So when it comes to, you mentioned context, right? How important is it or how are you navigating that whole concept of keeping context in as the product evolves and you need to kind of stay. So okay, let me kind of put it in a different way. If I'm a product owner and I am buying into your product, take care of security for me in a way. Okay. And I may be wrong in terms of how I am approaching it. My expectation is that the product always has context of where my product is going, meaning where the product roadmap is evolving to, and what kind of new data sets that we are dealing with, what kind of new pathways and workflows have been added. And hence, we are continuously proactively making sure that we are not failing anywhere. How do you manage? That's a big, very difficult problem to be on top of,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Keeping context of, because if there is a change that happens in the product, the underlying product, and if your security fix breaks something that was previously working, that's a huge risk again from a workflow
yeah,
perspective,
yes,
right?
yes, yes.
So how do you deal with that kind of stuff? I mean, is
Yeah,
that a concern?
absolutely. And I think the way we do it is through integrations. So what we do is we have integrations with Jira, we have integrations with GitHub, and so on. So which means that anytime you are updating, and that's the whole concept of making the threat model as a living document or a continuous threat modeling as opposed to a one-time threat modeling. And that continuous threat modeling is very important from that perspective. So anytime your epic gets updated, the tool gets that information and updates the threat models and creates maybe some of the security requirements along with how the product is evolving. And I think that is where I was referring to carrying the context along through the life cycle of the product, because things change. You build something and then you want to add another feature. You will obviously create some repository where you are managing all the requirements and everything. So we tap into that and proactively figure out what has changed, and from that we can update the security requirements and threat models. So we have got those integration, and integrations obviously help us do that.
Yeah. So basic thing is like if I'm creating a new feature and if I'm before I'm when I'm about to hit deploy, I should be able to see a checklist that is generated by our product. It says make sure this, or it does kind of check through the code and then says, okay, this is
Yeah,
taken
it
care of.
actually does it. So if you were to follow the proper product development lifecycle, you would probably create some requirements and give it to the developers. And while you are creating those requirements, what the tool does is it augments those functional requirements of the feature with all the non-functional security requirements. So
Okay,
even before the developer starts coding, your security requirements are ready, and the developer can come and start coding those security requirements as well.
got it. I think that's an advantage for you because it saves a lot of time in terms of really thinking through the challenges whenever there is something new that comes up on the development side of things.
Yes, yes, no.
AI native challenges. Do you see any AI native challenges today for your type of product?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm seeing quite a bit is there is there are a lot of AI apps that are being built. So AI apps obviously have newer kind of challenges that have. So if you look at when you are red teaming a regular application, you might look at, hey, is there any SQL injection? Is there any other OWASP 10 kind of thing, or OWASP API 10 kind of an issue? But obviously, with newer apps, AI native apps, you have different kinds of challenges. Can someone do a prompt injection? Can there be a data exposure? There are all other kinds of scenarios. So I think as far as red teaming, and of course, even during the threat modeling phase, there are newer kinds of threats and challenges that are being uncovered. And that's a very newer and interesting use case. And I'm seeing more of that as I talk to customers. They are building a lot of AI native apps, and they need to make sure that those apps have security built in. So that's definitely one of the interesting use cases that I've seen. Come on.
Okay. Um, the other thing that comes to mind is how many people question the inference that that your product brings up. Meaning, if a product says there is a again, I've not seen the product yet, so my question may come across as not relevant, but the question is about explainability, right? Meaning,
Mhm.
I'm using a product, it's giving me a recommendation, but how did it come to this? How do you infer this?
Yeah.
Does that become a question or conversation?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we have obviously thought about is explainability is very, very important for any AI based solution. And so when we are creating threat models, we provide even security requirements, we provide enough context around it to say that, okay, this particular requirement has been highlighted because of so and so reason. So there is a good amount of explainability. And I think that is something that people care about a lot. How do you, like you said, how did you come up with this requirement? That is number one. And then the second thing also is that in any AI based tool, there is a evaluation phase as well, the eval phase, where somebody human in the loop, they look at the responses and provide some sort of a feedback or input and say that, okay, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. So there is a little bit of back and forth, and we have a very nice chat UX interface through which they can get those things answered. And once they are finally happy with, hey, this is a threat model, I'm good, they can just publish it.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's more about making sure that it's accurate over
Yes,
time,
yes.
right?
This is something that I wrote another blog about, where when recently there was a I think an IBM report which talked about, hey, 95% of all AI applications are failing and all of that, right? And the reason for that, why people, or 95% of applications, AI applications, are not going to production, or something to that effect. I think there are few things that you need to take care of to make sure any AI application or any AI based solution, even including ours, provides high accuracy. Accuracy is very, very important, right? Hallucination is a problem. So the first one is, of course, context. You need to provide it good amount of context. The second thing is you need to make sure that you are doing proper evals. So when you get a response, you train the model to make sure that, hey, looks, this doesn't, or train the agent, not the model, train the agent to make sure that, hey, this response is good, this response is bad, and so on. And the human, of course, cannot be avoided. You absolutely have to have humans in place, and then some guidance that the human can provide, saying that, hey, like I was saying, in a red teaming scenario, they can say that don't do password spraying, go look at the S3 bucket, for example. So some of those things have to be taken care of in order for you to come up with better accuracy. And to your point, we need to provide explainability once the output has come out. Said, hey, these are the reasons why I've provided you this kind of a response. But that is also something that people can like or dislike and provide their opinion or the eval part of it. So all of these things should come together in order for your application or any kind of AI based solution to be more accurate. And those are some of the things that we are absolutely taking care of.
Are you at this point in time looking at any specific industry or domain, or is it agnostic?
Yeah. So for us, the industries that matter are industries where product hits your top line. We want to, for example, e-commerce, you are building a product, you need to make sure it's secure. If it's not secure, you are going to lose revenues. So e-commerce, SaaS products, you've got, you know, any kind of insure tech, fintech, health tech, or healthcare products, which are more, you know, customer facing and revenue generating, hitting the top line. So those are the kind of companies and organizations that we are essentially targeting.
A reason why I was asking that is because coming back to the previous point of, making sure it's explainable, industry to industry, the requirements will differ in terms of levels of accuracy required. The domain experts from there will come and, they will want to have to make sure that it reaches certain, again, for them, we may broad way of thinking about it, it could be compliance, but it's more about standards that they need to adhere to, things like that,
Correct,
right?
correct,
Be
correct.
it be
Yes,
it against data leaks, or be it against any other process related stuff that they may
correct.
have internally.
And I think this, one of the things to think about, this is an add-on on top of whatever the company is already doing, because most of the companies don't think about threat mod. I mean, as I was saying before, right? They want to do threat modeling, but they find it to be heavy and academic, and so they kind of put it off towards the end. So what this does is, whatever security has been put in place in some of these more secure conscious industries or companies, we add on to that by bringing in security early on, making sure that there is all these threat models, and when you are building your application, all of these things are taken care of.
You kind of led me to my next question, wherein if I'm an existing, I already have security consultants, I already have the biggest names in security and their products that have been plugged into my pipeline. Um, why do I look at you? Right? That
Yeah.
was the primary thing. And
Yeah.
how do you? So the point is, even if I look at you and say, okay, I want to try this because maybe at a C suite level, I say, okay, let's try and do this. But we all know when it comes to enterprise, there is so much of resistance at the operational or unit level because they're comfortable in the way they work and they are confident in the systems they already have. They don't want to change anything because it could be more work. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you navigate that?
Yeah. I think, and I've built security solutions which go inline into your product, and that is hard to do. Where if I say that, I'm going to put in a firewall in line with your traffic, then the whole skepticism comes about that, hey, are you going to slow down my traffic? Are you if you become one hop in my traffic flow, you can, if something you break, then I'm gone, kind of a thing. So those kinds of issues come up. In our case, however, what we are doing is we are ensuring that your application becomes more secure. Whatever tools people have in place, they can continue to use that. And even through our integrations, we make our product very invisible. That's the goal. So, for example, once you configure it, and the configuration can happen in any way you want. Once you configure it, after that, your any kind of issues that show up, like for example, you want the security requirements to be sent directly to your Jira, it will happen. So you don't need to specifically come in, spend a lot of time on the tool in order for you to get all the security requirements. So security requirements will show up on Jira. If you want to the threat models to show up in your Slack channel, you can do that. So the product becomes almost invisible after you put it in practice. And it is obviously not affecting your inline traffic. It is making your existing solutions better, more robust. So that is something that I think most of the um, customers or potential customers we are talking to, it resonates well with them. They understand this. They also feel that threat modeling is something that they have been putting off just because of the fact that it is very heavy and cumbersome and academic in nature, and it's stale. As I was saying, you need continuous threat modeling, but people sometimes create those threat models. They never get implemented because the proper security requirements were not created. So for all those various reasons, and that becomes stale. So if you give someone a solution where it is not interfering with your current security investments, it is making your current security investments more productive, and at the same time, it is solving the problem that you have with security, and then making the collaboration with the product engineering teams faster, I think people definitely want to adopt such a solution, which is lightweight, heavy, and almost invisible.
Wanting to adopt is okay because I get that they will want to
Yeah.
adopt it. But my question is more about how easy is it to implement? So at a unit level. So I'll say, yes, I want this. This is going to ease up a lot of my problems. But when you say, let's start with a pilot and you have to go and implement it, how easy is it to integrate into an existing system is what I was wondering.
Yes, yes. No, absolutely. I think one of the things that, based on all my past experiences, that the moment somebody says, I want to try it out, to the point that they are up and running, that has to be minimized, because that is the first impression that a customer gets about your product. And that is something that we have very, very carefully made sure it is absolutely minimum. So for example, we have got integration with Dscope, which provides all the authentication authorization. So so you just log in. It is integrated with your IDP and so on. Once you log in, you can start working on your, just provide the integration with your Jira, get some of the security requirements, and you are off creating the threat models and stuff. So it's, the onboarding time is very, very straightforward. Yeah. And that has been one of our OKRs. One of the very, very important OKRs for us has been that, and I've seen this before when it's a cumbersome product. We have done cloud networking product back in Juniper days, and it used to take a lot of time for product to get onboarded. So I don't want that, because then by the time the thing
Yeah.
starts, there's fatigue has kicked in, and people are like,
Yeah.
"Hey, this is taking too much time." So
You're
that is
18
one of the
months down.
strict. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that has been a very strict OKR to make sure that the onboarding process has to be very, very straightforward.
What do you think is the future of a security engineer? Let's say in 5 years from now, where do you see what? I know the role is going to evolve. We know that humans are going to remain in the loop, but do you think it's going to get more nuanced or much more domain heavy? Where do you see this going for a security engineer?
Yeah, I do see that, as you said, the role is obviously going to get evolved, because with AI, AI is almost like a force multiplier for any job function. You are, as a security engineer, you are focused on more advanced stuff. And one of the other things that we were also talking about earlier is that hackers are not sitting idle, right? So there will be lot more of agentic usage to breach environments. So their role becomes even more important. How do you prevent that with the scale and complexity of not just hacks, but even the applications, which are becoming more and more complex? So over time, everything is shifting towards, top right, where things are becoming more complex, things are mm, getting done with a lot more speed. So a security engineer's role becomes even more important. It's just that what they are doing today is going to be taken care of AI, but they are going to move into more advanced stuff. That's how I look at it.
Okay. Do you see that Apexon can become like, the source of truth for a security engineer at all times? Meaning you say, so you say, okay, these are our models. This is what our test reports have or scores are, and these are the predicted or these are the future models that we recommend in the system and stuff like that.
I think as far as product security is concerned, I do see that for a product security engineer, Apaxon becomes the go-to resource. It so one of the goals that we have stated for ourselves is, how do you make product security almost invisible to a product security engineer? They are getting whatever they need wherever they are spending most of their time. If they're spending time on Slack, they're getting everything right there. They've just done some configuration. So for them, Apaxon almost becomes invisible. It's almost like electricity or water, right? You turn on the tap, you get water. You don't think
Right.
about where is this coming from. That's how we want product security to be, where they just open their Slack message and they see all the threat models already created, all the security requirements there, what has been implemented, the entire life cycle of that is taken care of, etc. And so, um, yeah, of the future of the product security engineer, to your earlier question, is exactly that. They get everything about the security of the product wherever they're they're spending most of their time in.
Now, what are the fallbacks in case the product recommends something to an org and then that doesn't go as planned? Meaning, it's you're generating a lot of stuff as
Yeah,
well, right?
yeah,
You're
yeah,
making
yeah.
recommendations. So,
Correct.
what is the fallback in case a recommended security fix actually breaks things and doesn't solve something?
Yeah, I think over time, I do believe that that is something that needs to be minimized and should be minimized over time. So, because this is very directly linked to the product requirements. So, based on the functional requirements, we are creating all the non-functional requirements. So, this is very much linked to the product requirements. So, chances of that happening are somewhat low, but that is the whole goal, to make sure that the recommended remediations and recommended requirements that are being provided actually make the product more secure, rather than bringing in more and more risks into the picture. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, initially there might be some of that, and which is where the evals and the other things comes in. I do see that. So maybe rephrasing your question a little bit, what might end up happening is that there might be some requirements that you are putting in, which is an overkill, which means that it was not needed, but you still put those requirements. But the other case where you have, and it could also be that you might have missed some of the requirements which should have been put in place, right? So those are the two scenarios. Over time, what we want to make sure is that the security is comprehensive enough, so it takes care of all the risks of your application, and
Okay.
also it is enough so that you are not making it over secure for your particular use case. So that's basically the goal that we have.
Okay. Cool. So, how does the space look like in terms of how many other products how many other companies are trying to do what you're doing? That is one. And second question is, what are the current challenges you're dealing
Yeah. So um, I think as far as threat modeling is concerned, there are a few legacy, I would call them legacy companies. Arius Risk. There's a product called Threat Modeler. They don't obviously take agentic approaches. There's a lot of manual work that you have to do, where you have to draw the data flow diagram and things like that. So I think that space definitely requires some disruption, and that is where what we are bringing in. One of the other differentiators for us is we are looking at the entire product life cycle, as opposed to just looking at the design phases. And that is something which is very important, because you do something in the design phase. How do you ensure that that has been implemented in your product, entire product? So you have to look at the later stages of the life cycle, which is something I'm not sure if there are any companies that are trying to take a look. So that is definitely a big differentiator for us, looking at the entire life cycle of the product. Um, so that's what the landscape looks like. And then your second question was about challenges that we're facing. I think if you look at what makes a startup successful, there are these 4 T's, right? The team, the traction, the technology, and the TAM. I think the TAM part is pretty clear. This is a big market, so we obviously know that this is a big market. Team wise, after we raise a round, we are obviously going to expand our team. So that is one very, very important thing. We would like to look for people who are interested in this space. So we will expand the team. Technology wise, I think so far we are pretty good. I mean, my co-founder is a rock star. He's been part of 6 startups so far, and he's pretty good at his own stuff and all the technology stuff. Traction is one area that we always need help, and so anyone who is building products, if they want to try out, we have a community version which we will release in, maybe by the time this podcast is out, the community version should be out. That is one area where I would love for people to try out the product and kind of give us feedback. So I wouldn't call it as a challenge, because we are talking to a number of product and security leaders, and we are getting them to try out the product. But I think that is always some area that I can definitely get more help on, where since it's a community version, people can go, it's a self-serve kind of a model. They can go try out the product, give their inputs on the product, and that's how we can improve the product even more. So I would say traction is one area where we would definitely need some help to get more and more users. And eventually, once we are ready to expand, we would obviously have to have a team in place, a bigger team in place.
for? Who's your typical user to try out the community version? Meaning, if I'm
Yeah,
a
yeah.
founder, can I try it out, or if I'm interested in security, or if I'm like a hacker? So who should try it out? Yeah.
If you are let's say a product security leader, absolutely you should try it out, which means if you are responsible for security in your organization. If you are a product leader, you should absolutely try it out, because while you are creating all the functional requirements of your product, you want to create all the security and non-functional requirements of your product. So it obviously helps you as well. If you are building out your product and it is more customer facing and you want to make sure that security is taken care of, it's absolutely a good idea to try out the product and see how many security requirements are generated. What is the threat model? What can go wrong in your application or product kind of thing. So anyone who is responsible for either securing a product or building a product, both of those, they can try out of the product and get a lot of inputs from there.
So it has to be people who have finished products, who are
Or
building
building,
products.
they are,
Yeah.
yeah, they are building products. Or even if they have finished the product, it's always a good idea to go back and see if my threat models have been created properly. If I don't have one, I can create one.
Okay.
If I can also see that what are proactively, you can go and even if your product is built out, you can go and check, have I implemented all the security requirements? What could go wrong with my application as well? So whether you are in the initial phases of your design or whether you are in the already released the product, that makes complete sense. Look at the entire life cycle. But also, people who are in a product role as well as in a security role. Makes sense. Yeah. So I think one of the things that we are doing is we are coming out with a community version of our product. And my ask would be for anyone who is building products or even have a product, who are in the product, or who are a product leader or a security leader, to try out our product. We have got threat modeling and security requirements as one of the first two use cases that we'll cater to. So I would definitely like for you to try out our product and give us feedback and inputs. It's a self-serve product, so it'll be great if you can do that.
With in today's world, do you see a lot of people getting more and more interested in security as a must have now, as compared to a compliance thing or an afterthought? Uh, Considering what you guys are doing, as well as you seeing a lot of action in the space, and do you see a stronger community, or even do you see a community building up around?
Yeah, I think absolutely, people are getting more and more security conscious as there are so many breaches that keep happening, and people are thinking about how do I make my environment more secure. Throwing a lot more tools into the product doesn't, or into your application or your environment, doesn't help anymore. So how do you think of security in a more holistic manner, right? Going from design to deployment. So people are thinking more and more, and in that context, there are many a lot of content and podcasts that have come up. In fact, we have a podcast on product security. It's called ProdSec Decoded, where we talk to security leaders, try to understand their challenges. And so there is a lot more consciousness about security. And also, it used to be that developers did not care as much, or developers or product owners did not care so much about security, maybe several years back. Today, however, it is front and center for them. There is leadership also, almost at the board level, that are responsible for figuring out why a particular environment has been breached, or what security measures are being taken. So overall, I do feel there is a lot of awareness and talk about security. There are, of course, we also put in a lot of blogs and content out there on our LinkedIn profiles, just talking about the challenges that people face. What are all the trends that we are seeing in the security space, especially in the product security space? What are the things that people should take care of? Why are some of the um, breaches or issues happening, some of the cultural shifts that are happening? All of these things we talk about in our blogs and in our podcast as well.
Nice. So we'll add the description to these resources in the description of the YouTube videos on the channel. So those of you who are listening in can check it out. Also, do you have any active Discord or Reddit communities that you're participating?
So we do participate in Reddit and some of the other communities. We don't have a channel of our own, which we will create pretty soon. As soon as we have the community version is going to come out, and we are going to have a channel where people can provide their feedback and talk about product security more and more. But yeah, I mean, we are always available on our LinkedIn profiles. We have got a good amount of engagement on LinkedIn, so it'll be great if people want to reach out, discuss anything about product security.
Awesome. Great. So Pratik, this has been a really, really interesting conversation. It has been a real pleasure of mine to talk about this space. I don't think it is spoken about enough. And I love that it connects parallelly to the UX world as well, which is where I pretty much am most of the time. And of course in the context of products and enterprise and stuff. But it's been great.
Thank you, Sanjeev, for having me. It was absolutely a pleasure talking to you. So looking forward to more such of your discussions.
Absolutely.